Assignment 2, Part 1. The story of the Jewish people, the pre-modern period. As you read through the materials, have in mind the question which you will answer for your assignment. On balance, do you think it was a good or a bad thing for the Jewish world that the majority of Jews in this period ended up living outside of the land of Israel? Please give reasons for your answer. Introduction and recap. In the last assignment, we examined the development of a Jewish society whose centre, both demographically until the late Second Temple period and culturally, lay in the historic land of Israel. We witnessed extraordinary changes as the society was transformed from a small tribal society based on local communities under the leadership of elders to a much more complex society ruled by kings or high priests in a centralized structure built around Jerusalem and the temple. We also saw that the Jewish people, for most of the Second Temple period, lived under the control of different empires who granted them considerable freedoms but not independence. The Romans limited Jewish freedoms considerably, and tensions flared as the Romans became a harsh, occupying power. This resulted in two great revolts. The first, 66 to 70 CE, ended in the destruction of the Second Temple. The second, 132 to 135 CE, led by Bar Kokhba, led to further great loss of life. Following the loss of the temple, we noted the rise of a new rabbinic leadership who saw themselves as the next legitimate leaders of the Jews. The rabbis created a series of scholarly tools in order to guide the Jews through this period of crisis. It was this leadership that developed the Mishnah, the great text that would serve as the handbook of Jewish life for thousands of years. However, Eretz Yisrael was fading as a Jewish centre. Many Jews had left the country well before the destruction of the temple, but now Jews were streaming out of the country. Other Jewish centres began to flourish on the basis of the scholarly ideology and tools that had been developed in Eretz Yisrael. In this chapter, we will examine the dynamics of Jewish community in these emerging diaspora centres. We will see the growth and the decline of great Jewish communities in different parts of the world. The basis had been laid in Eretz Yisrael. The results were being seen throughout the world. The story of the Jews was changing yet again. Creating new centres, the emergence of Babylon. In the last assignment, we noted two large Jewish centres developing in the last years of the Second Temple period: Alexandria, Egypt, and Babylon. It looked as though Alexandria would become the greater of the two communities, but it suddenly fell into sharp decline after two revolts by the local Jews against their Roman masters. The Romans crushed both revolts ruthlessly, and many tens of thousands of Jews were killed. The community continued, but its glory days had passed. Instead, we pick up the story in Babylon. The year is 400 CE, and we are in the town of Sura in southern Babylon. Sura has been an important centre of Torah for almost 200 years, since a yeshiva, Torah Academy, was started there by the great scholar known as Rav. Since then it has flourished, and at the time that we make our visit, the great scholars of Sura are engaged in a very important piece of work. Our guide is the well-known scholar Ravina, who we meet on a usual busy day.
Shalom to you all. Let me start by asking you to look at the sight through that door over there. Jews learning Torah. Inside the great study hall and spilling out into the various courtyards, filling up every available spot. All of them are studying a part of the Mishnah, but just look how seriously they are studying. It's as if they don't have enough time to learn it all, so they are throwing themselves into it in the limited time that they have. And the fact is that they don't have enough time. Very few of them are professional scholars. Most of them are actually farmers and traders. At least for 10 months of the year they are. For 2 months of the year they become students of Torah. Every Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, and every Adar, the month before Pesach, they come to the yeshiva. These are the easier months in the agricultural year for people to take some time out to learn Torah. Here in Sura, one of the greatest yeshivot, they say that the custom has been going on ever since the great Rav founded the yeshiva. Rav studied under Yehuda Hanasi and brought the Mishnah to Babylon. He realized that although the community here was very large, it was also very ignorant. Jews had been in Babylon for almost 800 years, but it had never been a place of great Jewish learning. So Rav started a yeshiva here. Together with a few other major yeshivot in Babylon, we have now been producing our own scholars for generations. We've been discussing the meaning of the Mishnah and the Torah ever since the yeshiva began. Many of those discussions are preserved in our collective memory. However, in the last few years, we have started to put a record of these discussions in writing. Here in Sura, it was Rav Ashi who started the project. It will be a mammoth task collecting records of thousands of discussions of the meaning of the Mishnah and the Torah, but it is a hugely important one. To work out the exact demands of Jewish life, perhaps apply to new situations that have not arisen before. The heads of the different yeshivot are coordinating the work. It will be the first great Babylonian project and will put us on the map in a big way. The truth is that we're already a well-known Jewish community here in Babylon. How do I know? The best proof is that the heads of the yeshivot receive numerous questions from people all over the Jewish world, usually rabbis, looking for guidance. Sometimes the questions are about specific cases. What should be done in such and such a case? What does the law say about this? Sometimes they are bigger issues that need to be examined. It just shows you our yeshivot are known all through the Jewish world. We are seen as the experts. There are still yeshivot in Eretz Israel, and we are careful to talk of them with respect. But very few people really see them as major places of learning. It's hardly surprising. They've had it very hard there with the Romans and the Christians. It isn't always easy here either. We have to be very careful with the authorities. There have been better rulers and worse rulers, but we just keep our heads down and get on with the studying.
Ravina was right. The Jewish communities of Babylon were really on the map and would continue to be influential communities for many years to come. Over the course of this period, the great project, which had been started at Sura by Rav Ashi, would slowly turn into what we know today as the Babylonian Gemara, or the Talmud Bavli. Tension in Babylon. Who should lead the Jewish community? In Babylon, the Jews enjoyed considerable autonomy. The head of the Jewish community was called the Exilarch, Resh Galuta. It was a hereditary title, dating back to at least the 2nd century CE, and was believed to descend from King David. The position commanded great respect amongst the governing bodies in Babylon. The Exilarch was often part of the king's inner circle and royal court. He was responsible for collecting the taxes of the whole Jewish community and delivering them to the king. He headed up a large organizational structure and received great respect from the community. As time went on, the scholarly leadership, the heads of the great yeshivot, and the political leader, the Resh Galuta, both saw themselves as the legitimate heads of the community. Tensions often broke out between them. At the root of this dispute lay the fundamental question: What kind of community was the Jewish community? Was it a religious community? If so, primacy should go to the rabbis and scholars. Or was it a political community, and the people in the community happened to be religious? If so, the Resh Galuta was the natural head. In fact, this question of the religious vis-à-vis the political secular became a fundamental issue, framing the existence of all pre-modern Jewish diaspora communities. Tension with Babylon. Who should lead the Jewish world? It was not only inside Babylon that tensions were developing. Tensions were also brewing between Babylon and the older Jewish centre in Eretz Yisrael. In fact, for a while, the Jewish world was a world with two centres: Babylon, with its great scholarly institutions, versus Jerusalem, with its history and holiness. On a theoretical level, the centrality of Eretz Yisrael was still accepted by Jews everywhere. However, the real controversial issues were practical ones. Who should make the decisions for the developing Jewish world? Where would the real authority lie for shaping the future? Whose religious scholarship should take precedence? The struggle would be ultimately won by Babylon. At a certain point, it made no sense to pretend that there was any real competition between the two centres. There was always respect for the centre in Eretz Yisrael, but it became clear that the real centre had moved elsewhere. For example, the Gemara, which was developed in the land of Israel in parallel to the one developed in Babylon, was considered to be less relevant and useful. The diaspora had come out clearly on top. The Jewish story had moved on. That's the end of Assignment 2, Part 2. The story in Assignment 2, Part 2 will start here.